Hi everyone, this is Adelaide Eternal and one of our monthly tournaments. We're holding Eternal tournaments every month, Vintage, Highlander, Legacy, and this time we have our final round of our recent Highlander tournament. So this is Sarvin McClinton and I'm here with Beckett Wolf in the booth.
G'day guys.
So we've starting off with two players that we've seen once before in the previous 4 rounds. We have on the left Brendan Dobson, who is running an Elf land destruction deck, and Wes McTernan on the right, who is running a junk deck. So that's black, white, green, mid-range value.
Yeah, and Brendan's list is essentially classic green stompy, which is a sort of archetype that when we all first start out playing Magic, we all want to try out. And in a format like Highlander, it's just actually really viable and competitive, isn't it?
Absolutely great. It's got that little bit better feel than Legacy Elves in that even though it's less consistent, you've got a lot more variety of big fatties you can get down onto the board. He's got Sigarda, he's got the big Garrick, he's got Primeval Titan,
Rofalos, Llanowar, Emissary.
Yeah.
These are really cool cards, and you can brew, and I think there's a lot of things that are just really viable in this format, which is why it's so fun. Turn 1 Utopia Sprawl. If you've ever played the modern land ramp deck, it's very similar to that. So if you can get something like a Voyaging State or Arbor Elf, you can untap and get a bit of mana ramp.
Yeah, that's great. So turn 1, he's basically kind of making a Llanowar Elf, so to speak, but with upside.
Yeah, he's got the potential to really go off. I think he also runs Garrick Wildspeaker in the sideboard, which lets him untap 2 lands.
Nice. So this is the classic opening you want to see in a mid-range deck. You want to go fetch land into Deathrite Shaman. So going to provide him mana as well as late game life drain and exiling creatures. So we start off with Ice Storm, I believe that is. So that one is basically a Stone Rain for green. 3 mana, destroy target land.
Really pivotal too. I think that might be a strip mine that Brennan used to cast the Ice Storm, and that means that the next play Wes has, if he wants to fetch it, then it's going to get stripped. So Brennan's got the chance to pull away a bit here.
So that's quite scary. I mean, it would be amazing if Wes didn't have the Deathrite Shaman, but it's already very good. So Wes really wants to drop a turn 2 threat here, and I did notice he had two mana threats in his hand in the opening hand. He had a Khazali Pride Mage, which is the Exalted 2/2 that can be sacrificed to disenchant something.
And it can hit that Utopia Sprawl, which might be relevant if he just wants to slow Brennan down.
Worst case scenario, at least it's got a relevant ability. He's got a Vampire Hex Mage as well, which is a double black 2/1 first striker. And he opts to go with an Abrupt Decay. So he's Abrupt Decaying to in a similar way that you would say Abrupt Decay a Llanowar Elves.
I guess it's a similar to strip mining in the sense here. Now, if Brennan wants to strip himself, he's putting himself back too many turns. So I think that's fine by Wes. I think that's a good play.
I think that's essentially saying, hey, you got to decide now whether you want to strip me, and you're psyching him out and saying, I've got other lands in my hand, I don't mind.
Abrupt Decay is a great spell, but you can't be too precious with it in this format. You only get one, and sometimes people, want to hold up their really quality counter spells, but sometimes you got to make the tempo play.
Now this is perfect in the mid-range matchup here in game 1. Having that Sylvan Library come down after Wes has already used his Abrupt Decay is a bit of a feel-bad moment, but it couldn't have been expected here. He really needed to shut Brendan off that mana to let him stop him getting out in front.
Because I don't think I'd really want to be sacrificing it to the Sylvan Library here. Maybe if Wes had like a Reclamation Sage, he'd be pretty happy to Rec Sage the Sylvan Library.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I don't know if I want to spend a whole nother mana and sacrifice my Pride Mage here.
Absolutely. It's especially a non-bow here in that if you allow him to have the Sylvan Library, but you keep beating down with an Exalted 3/3 or beating with another creature that gets exalted, the card draw off the Sylvan Library is very irrelevant.
And look, Brennan's already paid for life, so regardless, if Wes does elect to sacrifice, he's already lost card advantage.
Exactly. So just let him have all the cards in the world and beat down with your Exalted 3/3 because you're going to take him to 11 and
But
you've got
it
a
puts
Deathrite
Wes in a
Shaman.
place because it puts Brendan in a place because Brendan now is always going to just drop that big threat, and Wes really he's got to go with this beatdown path now.
Absolutely. So until Brendan gets a blocker out, that Kazali should be going to the face and just put him under pressure. But I think
Could
here
get
now
another
that
6 damage in.
True, now that there's a fetch land, there's a blocker, right? Oh, Green Sun Zenith for 2. So he'll be searching out someone like Rofalos, I would assume, just to tap for a large amount of mana. So Rofalos featured in a match earlier where he's a 2 mana, 2/1, I believe, and he taps for 1 green mana for every forest you control.
Yeah, and as you've seen, he has got the Rofalos. Brendan's not really interested in trying to find, some kind of enter the battlefield or some kind of workshoppy toolbox creature. He knows his game plan. He wants the mana, and that's what he's going for. He's setting up for a big turn.
Next turn could be 7 mana with a land drop, so Wes should be a little bit scared. If he has a removal spell, something like a Snuff Out would be really nice right now. Keep him able to apply pressure whilst killing the creature.
Definitely. I think Wes needs to ride this Pride Mage, and it's a shame because I think it's just a tiny bit too slow.
So, cracking a fetch here. The advantage of this particular game, Wes has been treated to the fact that he has had a land drop every single turn.
And he's been treated to the fact that with all the land destruction and fetches, Deathrite Shaman's not running out of gas anytime soon, is it?
Yeah, this really worked out very well. If I was coming into this blind, I would say that the Elf land destruction deck with the much bigger top end, and there's the Council's Judgment.
There's the Council's Judgment, indeed.
I would say he has the advantage, but this has played out perfectly for Wes.
But Brendan's got 4 mana, a lot of Stone Rain abilities, and Stone Raining here again. I think he could do it here, but there's only so long he can do it for, because eventually that Pride Mage is going to get relevant.
Very true. Now this is big. So Deathrite Shaman has exiled land to cast that Council's Judgment earlier. So the Knight of the Reliquary is probably a 4/4, I would assume.
But getting smaller, getting bigger. The Deathrite Shaman keeping it under wraps, but I think I'd be pretty happy with a Knight of the Reliquary here, even if it's just to fetch out and search for a Guy's Cradle.
So if you're in that position and you're thinking about the Guy's Cradle, would you assign Knight of the Reliquary as a blocker?
That's a great question. If I knew it traded, no. I'd take another 3.
Here we go. We have an answer for you. There's only 1 land in his
so it would trade.
It would trade and go down to a 2/2 after exile. So
even if it's traded, I don't love it. I think eventually you do want to be blocking, but for now, have that 1 extra turn with Knight of the Reliquary.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just takes 3 here. There's no reason to throw the Knight under the bus, especially since his game plan is going to be pretty big next turn. If he can play a land drop and sacrifice and get a Guy's Cradle, but no. So let's call that a land drop. He got a land drop off the Path to Exile, which gives him a basic land.
I think nothing wrong with that. And what was interesting is Wes elected to swing first and then path. So he was happy for the trade. He wanted to offer Brendan the trade. If Brendan traded, then he'd still have a Path to Exile.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah, Path to Exile is still always going to be pretty good. There's a lot of creature-heavy threats. So
the only time that backfires is if Brendan has a big threat in to come down the following turn, and it happens to have hexproof or some such, like a Thrun or that kind of a threat.
And the Pride Mage has done so much. We've talked about it twice before now, and if nothing else, even if it doesn't end up presenting lethal, it's kept that Sylvan Library in check, and I think that it's done its job.
Absolutely.
Without destroying the Sylvan Library, it's kept the draw aspect of it in check, and that's all it needed to do. And Brendan still needs to answer it.
I know we come back to this probably every second match that we commentate on, but Kazali Pride Mage is very good in this format.
Yeah, it's a hidden gem.
So in comes another land destruction spell. So in this particular game, it's possible that Brendan was swamped with land destruction and
The
Wes
turn 1
was
Shaman just did
the turn 1
everything.
Shaman.
If there was no turn 1 Shaman, this would be a really different game.
Yeah, absolutely. So Wes has managed to hit all of his land drops. It's really, really perfect. Now he's presenting lethal. So an attack with Exalted on the Khazali Pride Mage for 3, and then an activation of the Deathrite Shaman, which you always want to target your own graveyard there, just in case. Just in case they have some kind of sneaky little
Really well played by
interaction.
Wes, I thought, with not blowing the Pride Mage, the Sylvan Library.
Yep,
Sometimes
pressure.
your eyes light up when you've got an enchantment or artifact destruction and they've got an enchantment or artifact out, but the 3 damage every turn was really relevant.
Absolutely. It's hard not to use a spell or an ability on a target when the target presents itself, especially when you know that target is going
Same
to
with that
do.
mental misstep. We were talking about in our other video. Can't get too greedy. Sometimes you've got to be patient and make the correct choice, especially when there's really, really powerful one-off spells like in Highlander.
Yeah, absolute masterful play. So now, when we go to the sideboard, what are we looking at here? This is kind of a mid-range matchup, but I mean, at the end of the day, you actually have a little bit of a combo element from Brendan in that he really wants to jam a bunch of creatures, somehow get a Guy's Cradle out, or sacrifice something to a natural order, just like Legacy Elves, to get out a big Craterhoof Behemoth.
Yeah, he naturally drew Guy's Cradle in his first game.
This is what's coming out, or coming in. A Duress and Zealous Persecution. Zealous Persecution, definitely one of the favourite cards in our playgroup. Does a lot in these mid-range matches by killing a bunch of elves, also pumping your team, often swinging for lethal, but also killing True Name Nemesis and Young Pyromancer tokens.
And it's just a combat trick. If you want to swing in with a few random, like a Scavenging Ooze and a Tarmogoyf, and they want to block with a Knight of the Reliquary and their own Tarmogoyf, and you flip it and you win the trades. It's really relevant.
Yeah, I really like Zealous Persecution. I mean, it's the kind of card that a mid-range deck wants against other mid-range decks. It's great. So what do we see from Brendan coming in?
Master of the Wild Hunt is another 4-mana just threat.
I like it.
And I think that he might side it in. What he sides out, I'm not sure. Scavenging Ooze is another one, but I think he's saving that up for spot removal. I don't know if Scavenging Ooze is any better than any of the other threats he's already got.
Well, I think in this particular game, game 1, we saw how the land destruction plan can backfire. You get glutted with a lot of land destruction, and your opponent gets glutted with a land drop every single turn and a turn 1 dork. So there is some rationale to removing some land destruction and instead packing it full of threats like Master of the Wild Hunt and Garruk Wildspeaker and Whisperwood Elemental.
Yeah, these are all just threats. I don't think they're particularly good against any one archetype, but against the mid-range deck, having more threats to answer is often enough. I think it's just Brandon's always going to win that threat game though, and it really comes down to how fast he can do that and whether or not Wes can get that combo off. He's got that Dark Depths combo.
Yeah, a spicy little combo in there. So in this way, he has a combo finish for Wes. He's got 2 lands that interact with each other, one of which makes itself into a copy of other lands on the battlefield, and the other one which comes into play with 10 ice counters on it. And when it has no ice counters on it, it gives you a 20/20 indestructible flying token. So the 2 of them together essentially both go to the graveyard and he gets himself a big 20/20. So he's also got other cards that interact with that, like Vampire Hexmage, which allow him to remove all of the counters from his land and create the 20/20 instantly. So having this possible combo finish does give Wes an alternative that Brendan won't be prepared for. He doesn't have white in his deck to be able to cast Swords to Plowshares.
And you can't really sideboard around it either, Sav, because you might put in all these great spells to stop a particular combo, but at the end of the day, Wes has got Siege Runner and he's got Restoration Angel. And if he can get a Mana Dork out and cast a turn 3 Siege Runner into a turn 4 Restoration Angel, you're just not going to win if your hand's full of counter spells or
land destruction,
tricks and trades to try to get around combo decks. And I think that's where Wes's deck is pretty
Absolutely.
strong.
We've seen land destruction go very well. I mean, in our first round, we saw how brutal it can be against an opponent. But I think in this one, taking out some of that land destruction, giving you cards, some mid-range creatures that allow you to get later into the game, and then in the late game, you get to slam your huge threats that just absolutely outclass the junk player's threats. I think that's his game
It's
plan.
exactly right. You don't want to be destroying land when they have a siege runner in play. We saw in the last game, Kozali Pride Mage was out, and Brennan had land destruction, and even a Kozali Pride Mage, which isn't a fantastic threat, still was enough to
Absolutely.
present enough damage. So I think hopefully he's taking it out.
He's got, there we go. We can see Thrun. We do still see quite a bit of land destruction there. He's got a thermocast. And
Runs in from the sideboard
nice. I mean, hexproof is difficult to deal with in
and
this one.
regenerate.
I think the only reason I love bringing Thrun in, and don't get me wrong, he's one of my faves. He's how can I jam Thrun into this deck? All right, he's straight in the sideboard.
The
He's
amount
the
of
first card
matches
in.
I've won casting no other spells except Thrun against control.
Yes, absolutely.
Just
The way
turn
to
4
go.
Thrun and just getting there.
But in this one, I like it here because it allows him to get to the late game and outclass Wes's threats. But in general, I don't bring Thrun in against the mid-range matchup because he is a 4/4, and the mid-range matchup has so many 4/5s, and sometimes he doesn't apply pressure like you
He
want him
seems
to.
silly when they drop Titania,
Mm,
something like that gets a bit of persistent value.
yeah. So here we've got the same opener on the opposite side, Savannah into Deathrite Shaman, and Wes with total respect for that turn 1 Deathrite Shaman, immediately kill it straight away. So this way he's essentially playing that land destruction type of role and putting Brendan back 1 turn.
I agree with the swords. You know, you can save up your swords for the big threats, but if you can kill them before they get to their big threats and slow them down from having the threat, every turn that threat's out, it's worse. And if you can get them out, look at
Here's the
this.
payoff. You swords their turn 1 Dork, which they expected to untap with to generate their turn 2 play, but instead they don't have a second or a third land.
Definitely relevant. There's always a chance when you do a wasteland type effects like that they just kept that hoping that they'd have that second mana to ramp into, you know.
And this is exactly why Strip Mine and Wasteland are points, because you can just win a game off them.
Sometimes you get free wins when someone goes, okay, this is, a bit land light. I've got 2 lands and 5 spells, but I might draw into 1, and then you strip that turn 1 and they don't top deck 1 for the next turn, and suddenly they're behind.
And you can see the resignation in Brendan's body language as he slinks back into his chair. He knows how far behind he is, and this is where you just go straight back to the Matrix and you think, not like this. Not like this.
Creative Behemoth can't feel good discarding to answers at any point, especially I'd say that's probably his number 1 threat. That's the thing. It comes in with haste, closes the game up. Don't need to mess around with even more big value creatures like Primeval Titan when Creator wins the game on the spot. So can't feel good for him to discard that.
Yeah, it's brutal. So here we do a pod paying life and not activating because Wes knows how far ahead he is. He could have swung for 1 with that Stoneforge Mystic, but really it's not.
I think by the second discard, there was the Whisperwood Elemental, which is one we were talking about on the sideboard. That's a real shame for Brennan, especially for the final sum. He had a good deck, but all due respect to Wes, I think he played really well in that first game, and I think the Clamp and Pod. That's a nice
interaction, drawing cards and searching your library for your next drop. I mean, this is where you get a Blade Splicer or something else just to continue on that train. And it is a pity to see in the final match of the day that someone can lose in this manner. But at the end of the day, that's what these decks do. I mean, sometimes you have a land destruction plan, and your goal is to do this exact thing to your opponent.
Definitely. So many times in these matchups as well, we find the turn 1 Dork to be really relevant. As we were saying in the last game, that turn 1 Deathrite Shaman was really relevant for Wes to stay in it.
So here, Wes...
and now destroying is the same.
heads up play from Wes. Instead of searching out a Blade Splicer and continuing on the pod chain, he searches out Aven Mind Sensor just to make sure that if Brendan does draw a land of his lands, he'll probably have something like 6 lands that are fetch lands, and he has the ability to essentially preemptively Stone Rain his opponent.
Brandon's on about 22 or 23 lands with a bunch of dorks, so...
Now, I believe he's trying to cast Natural Order on the Dryad Arbor, so
it's a nice little play.
This is going to fetch him something like a Primeval Titan or some other thing at the top of the deck, but Brendan's nowhere near getting back into this after Primeval Titan.
Yeah, look,
and the Titan obviously finds the rest of his combo, so he finds himself his Dark Depths and...
That's a really nice combo there. The Prime Time is a great threat by itself, and it also produces the combo threat the next turn. So it produces 2 threats, and you never feel bad about casting Primeval Titan on turn 6.
Yeah.
But especially when it gets a combo piece all on itself.
So this is the hand that Brendan kept. He sees land, Deathrite, bunch of 3 mana land destruction and Voice of Resurgence.
It's definitely a keep. It's not
fine.
Great, but
he's really...
I wouldn't want to ship that, especially when you run so many dorks and other lands. You're hoping to hit for the land drop.
I mean, he had turn 1 Deathrite, turn 2 Voice, and hopefully draw the next land in the next 2 draw steps to Stone Rain his opponent, who's on the draw. So it was fine. It was risky, but fine. So that wraps it up. So that's the final match of our Highlander tournament today. Thank you very much for watching, everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys. We're Adelaide Eternal. I'm Beckett, and this is Saab. So thanks for watching.